I'm Kira Cleveland, and this is Human Intelligence. With my co-host, Ned Hayes, we talk about the importance of human creativity in the age of AI. Welcome to the future.
Today, the Human Intelligence team is overjoyed to welcome rockstar singer-songwriter and humanistic thinker Corin Tucker to the show. Many of you will not need introduction to the singer who has helmed Sleater-Kinney since the 1990s. But for those who do, here's a brief rundown of her accomplishments and accolades. Corin Tucker is a co-founder of Sleater-Kinney, and she also is a member of the alt-rock supergroup Filthy Friends, along with Peter Buck and many other luminaries. She hails from Eugene, Oregon, but she's also famous for kicking off the Riot Girl movement in Olympia, Washington, with her band Heavens to Betsy. She's played alongside Soundgarden, Nirvana, and Brandy Carlisle. Rolling Stone called Corin a punk rock heroine, and in 2023, Rolling Stone ranked Tucker at number 155 on its list of 200 greatest singers of all time. We're very happy to have Corin as one of our first 100 registered musicians in the Human Creator Registration System. And we're excited to have Corin on the show today to talk about the plight of singers, songwriters, and musical artists of all types in the age of AI and how human creators can fight back. Welcome to the show, Corin.
Wow. Thank you. I feel like I should just peace out after that introduction. That was so kind. Thank you.
Little mic drop moment already.
Well, I've already had some conversations with you, Corin, about the state of music today. So we'd like to talk about some of those issues with you. First of all, you've said publicly that streaming was a real blow to working musicians. So can you tell us more about that change?
Yeah. I think from those of us folks who started playing music back in the day when we had these funny round discs that you heard music from called vinyl, or even CDs, right? We had physical products that people bought, and that's how we made music and sold music, and that's how people listened to music. So we had something physically that we produced that we put into people's hands, and we said, this is what we made, this is our music, this is how you can listen to it, right? So we had control over it. We had physical control over the content that we produced. It was before digital, right? It was a different world that we were born into, that we created our music into. And so when streaming came along, it changed how people listened to music, and it changed how people consumed music, and it also changed the control of music, right? And so I think for musicians, instead of having a physical product that we created and we had in our hands and we sold to people, suddenly we didn't have control of that anymore, right? Because the deal that was made with those streaming services was made from the record labels. Musicians were not involved in the licensing of our music to Spotify and Apple Music and the streaming services. We were not consulted. We were not part of that deal. And we still haven't been. Right? That's not been
Wild.
we have not, it's not been renegotiated. We've not been consulted on what kind of percentage we would like to be given of the music that the world listens to, what we think is fair for that content. We have not been consulted, right? We don't have a union like the film industry, the smart, incredible film industry that has unionized. We don't have a union that can strike and as one take our music off the platform, right? Which is what we should do, really, and say we need to renegotiate this to a more fair share of our content.
Right. Each artist really in the musical industry kind of stands on their own. I mean, Beyonce or Taylor Swift or Sleater-Kinney can say something about their individual stance, but it doesn't pertain to everybody, right?
Correct. And it doesn't have the impact of when you have the entire industry standing together, like the film industry does, and says, we're going on strike until we renegotiate for our whole industry, and say, because they did it with AI, right? They said, we're not having AI coming into the way that we write scripts without any say in what happens and just letting AI, write all these scripts without the writers union having accountability.
Yeah, and I mean, along those lines, with the advent of AI and that introduction, it's caused another sea of change, like you mentioned. How has that really been hitting working musicians?
I think that, you know, people are really concerned about the impact and what's going to happen. And I think that having lived through the change with streaming, a lot of people are concerned that it's going to be another technology change that we're not ahead of and we're not thinking about and we're not advocating for properly. And so I think there are groups that are trying to advocate for musicians. Like the Recording Academy, I think is doing a good job of coming together and saying they have this bill called that says no fakes, that's saying like we need to label what is AI and what's not. And, and say you can't imitate musicians and say that you're this known musician when you're actually, pretending to be them. That's not fair.
So, speaking of fairness, do you think there's a connection between how streaming systems have taken money from musicians and generative AI companies doing the same today? Is it a pattern of displacement and of dispossession?
I think the pattern I see are these tech companies, right, where the technology has gotten ahead of society, wrapping our head around it and kind of understanding how it impacts us, which is that's the story of civilization, like over and over again, right? Is that, the technology has just evolved super quickly and it happens before we understand really how it's going to change how we live, you know? Music has
Yeah.
been a part of human culture for as long as we can remember. It's an extremely part of human culture and we need it as part of our lives, and we know that. And the way that technology has changed it, just it happened, I think, more quickly than we understood how it was going to affect musicians. And I think AI seems like it could do that as well. We're concerned that, people will be consuming AI music instead of music that's created by human creators.
Yeah.
Is that a real fear or not? It's hard to tell right now. It's hard to tell if AI is going to be just a useful tool, like a keyboard instrument or another instrument that we could use, or if it's a little bit of both. But my concern is that if these tech companies are able to function without any restraint and they don't have any checks and balances on them, there's no regulation, there's no challenge. There's a government that's like, cool, like go ahead, like then that's not a conversation. That's just like a blank check, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's showing up in a lot of places, just that concept of the outcry for we need checks and balances. We need to think about this. We need, something to kind of slow the train down so we can wrap our heads around it. You as a professional musician, you know, is AI function it sounds like you agree that AI is functioning without restraint. And have you seen musicians being negatively impacted by AI? Like what's happening on the ground and in the recording studios today?
I think that I have heard from some people that work as songwriters that they feel like they're maybe just not going to get that work anymore, or they're going to get a lot less work, or that things are just becoming so kind of slimmed down into like, well, AI has kind of got that, right? Like AI can really handle so much of the songwriting responsibilities now in a way that I find really like deadening, like soul deadening in a way that I think songwriters are really concerned that they're going to have a lot less work. And that like a lot of the kind of inspiration and creation part of it is going to turn into stuff that's a lot less unique.
Yeah, that's common in the art, concerns as well, just like that AI is gonna create a general middle. Everything's gonna be kind of mid,
Yeah.
just good enough. Just a little bit ago, you used the phrase soul deadening. So tell us, why does it matter to tell the difference between human and AI music?
I think that there's something really important about valuing human creation and what it has meant for us, over the past couple of millennia, like I think the evolution of, if we just talk about music and we talk about composition and how that has evolved, that story in and of itself is really interesting, right? It's really special. And understanding that and understanding that how composition has worked is really important. And to then to not know if a song is, how much of that is done by computer and how much is done by that, with human composition, to me, I'm concerned about that. And I'm also concerned that, eventually, are we going to lose our composers to, artificial intelligence? Are people going to stop composing on their own? Like, are we going to lose those critical thinking skills of being able to come up with something from scratch, right? Totally from scratch, because, can I swear?
Yeah.
The weirdest shit is the coolest shit. Like the weirdest, like the most fucked up music, like that is where, like, okay, maybe that's not the stuff that like is the top of the charts, but that music, like the Velvet Underground, okay, that's like my baseline of like the most creative, most fucked up band. They were never a hit band, but they inspired an entire generation of musicians after them, right? Because it
Mhm.
was so creative, it was so bizarre. And if we don't have that level of creativity, a computer would never be like, "Oh, I know what we need, Velvet Underground." Like it would just, you
Right.
never get that level of creativity because a computer is always going to go like, what is going to be like that mid level you're talking about? What is going to be that level of like background music in a cafe that's going to keep everybody cozy? Like that
Hmm.
is what I'm talking about, soul deadening.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Well, another example is Flaming Lips. Things that are really out there that do not hit the pop charts and yet influence a whole generation of musicians, right?
Exactly.
Well, and just to geek out a little bit, I have a dance background, right? But I think any musician, when you're performing, like, why are you performing, right? Is it just because there are words and chords and that's what you're supposed to do? Or is there that emotion behind it, right? Like, why do you pick one song over the other? There's
Exactly.
reasons for it, right? Like,
Exactly.
it lights you up. And that's the same whether you're consuming it as well. There's a story there. There is an expression and a sharing of yourself. And that, I think, is a disconnect. Like, AI could make something that makes sense, that can sound good, but like where's the oomph and the buy-in and the emotion?
Exactly. And I'm not at all advocating that we don't let AI create music. I think that's cool and interesting, and like I'm curious. Like what can
Mhm.
it create? I'm totally curious. I'm 100% for that. I just think, I think your idea about labeling it as such is really important, and I think the idea of checks and balances is really important because that gives, you know, I just think that, the idea of giving content creators, of giving musicians, this control and this respect that we really, we've been slow to have, or a lack of for a long time, is really important.
Yeah. Well, you were, as we said at the top, one of the first 100 musicians registered in our system as a genuine human creator, a genuine human musician. And you just talked about it's important to distinguish. So, can you tell us more about why you registered and why you've continued to support this movement?
Yeah. I mean, I think that, like I said, having a human composer recognized as such, I think that's important. And I think, I've always believed in copyright is really important. And I don't understand why these AI companies are getting away with just blowing through all this copyright. That makes absolutely no sense to me. Like, why were they able to scrape all this content and just be like, cool, now we're going to like write songs and write books based on other people's work? Like that's the opposite of copyright, of what we've fought for. Like, there's rules about copyright. It's established law. And I believe that we should follow that. And I think AI should follow that as well. And so that's something that I want to stand up for and say, I want my music to be respected, and I want to be known as a human composer, and I want my copyright to be respected. And that's not going to work unless we get a coalition of a lot of people to come together and do it, right? Not just musicians, not just writers, not just people who are talking about this next generation of social media, but all of us to come together and say, like, we need to talk about this. We need to have a conversation about what this is going to mean, how this is going to impact us.
I love that. And thank you so much for your passion on this topic. It's so great to hear. And I keep hearing you say the words community, and moving forward, is that kind of the secret sauce that you think is going to be helpful here in helping people distinguish between artificial music and real music?
I do. I think that it's just a conversation that we need to keep having, and we need to definitely talk about this in terms of checks and balances, and in terms of a technology that is going to have a big impact. We know it is, like, we can see it. And, that's not saying it's like the automobile has just been invented, right? It could be like that. And, great, we're going to have automobiles on our street, but like, everybody needs to take a driving test and needs to have like seatbelts on. Like, that's the kind of conversation we need to have, so that we're all, we all get the same manual. We all agree to the same rules. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of, impact that this could have. And, we've somehow come to a society that has these like vehicles that drive all of our street. I'm not saying we can't get there, but like, we kind of need to quickly get up to speed with like this conversation that we need to have,
Absolutely. I love the name.
So, as we think about music moving forward, how can people, like people who are listening to musicians, people who are buying music, people who are streaming music, how can we support musicians and support especially human musicians?
That is a great question. Well, there's a couple of different suggestions I have. I think supporting live music is a great way to support human musicians who are out there trying to do what they do. And, actually buying merchandise from the band, whether it's from Bandcamp or from their website or from the actual band. Like, that's a great way to support actual bands and creators who are still doing what they're doing, And, I think that as we go forward, there's going to be some tougher conversations we're going to need to have about changing things, so that we're talking about legislation that needs to happen that, is protective of human musicians' copyright, and also gives us kind of more of a fair share off of the music that we've already created.
Great. Thank you, Corin. Okay, you heard it. Go support actual human musicians, go to live shows, buy merch from actual musicians, and support legislation that will keep musicians getting their fair share. So thank you. Thanks for your time, Corin.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited about your project, and thank you for having me.
You can find out more about any of these news items and hear the complete interview on the extended premium version of our podcast at humanintelligence.news. Today's episode was produced by Ned Hayes and engineered by Muhammad Adnan. Our analog-only human-themed music was created for the Human Intelligence podcast by Josh Pinkston of Nature and Spirit. This episode, and every episode, is brought to you by the Human Intelligence Institute team. That's all for Human Intelligence for listening to today's episode. As always, this episode is available online at humanintelligence.news.